In this video, we will talk about check constraints. Now, check constraints are a data validation method that you can use in SQL Server to validate the data you enter into your tables. Now, to do that, let's just go to Object Explorer. This time, we will use one of the other tables which we have in our demo database. And the demo database tables are, so we've got the products, employees, and customer, but I'm using customer in this scenario. So if we right click on customers and say design, once you're on design view, one thing to note here before you add the constraint, that constraints are only added on the table. So they're not column specific, but they are table specific. Now to add your constraint, you can click on your column. You can add the constraint from the menu bar here, which it says you've got a grid icon that says manage constraint. Click on that, it will bring up the menu that you need to add your constraint. Or I can just right click and we go say check constraints. So click check constraint. You've got your menu up here. We say add. We've got a check constraint with a name. So that's a CK check constraint underscore, and it tells you the customer's table because it's added on the customer's table. Now the expression is what the validation rule goes in. So you would put your validation rule in expression column. So in my case, what we're doing is we're just supposing that there is a scenario on our customers, they need to have at least 2 characters of a surname. So I'm just going to do that on mine. I'll say Len, open parentheses, just going to say last name, that is my column name, close parentheses, and the check in here is greater than or equal to 2 characters. So all my customers need to have at least 2 characters surname. Now the identity bit here is about the uh, rule identity. So we want to say, we know that there is a constraint on a customers table, but you don't know what it is doing. So you say customers, and then just go, I'm just going to put last name length. So now it's giving us a little bit more info in here. It's saying we check in for the last name length. And in description, if you want, you can put description in. So we're just going to put saying, last name needs to be 2 or more characters. So that's our description. It's gone in here. Now with the table design, what this is saying is how do you want to enforce this rule? We say check existing data on creation or re-enabling. So the existing data that we have on the system, we'll check for those to make sure they meet the minimum requirement. We'll also enforce the rule on inserts and updates. So it means if we're inserting any data in future or updating any existing data, they need to have the 2 character limit rule in place. And the last one is enforce for replication. Enforce for replication means if you've taken a backup of this database and you want to replicate this in somewhere else, in another DB, maybe in future, we want the rule to apply on replication as well. So that's all. I'm just going to keep everything as default. Now close. That's now closed. Now you can see that it's applied. You've got an asterisk after your table name. So 2 ways to save this. You can either do by Control S, or you can just click on the save button on top. That will just save our changes onto the table. Now once that's done, we'll close the table here. I'm just going to open the customer table again. So right click, select top 200. Now we will select the existing data which we have in the system. Now what we'll try to do in here is just to check whether the constraint is working or not. We'll add a new record, but this time we won't add we'll keep the last name less than 2 characters. So I'm just going to say Angie, and last name is, I'll just put in W. So say test address. They don't have address number 2. Well, they live in Leeds and they live in LS. 10 is their postcode. Now hit enter. What this is going to now do is it will just error, and it says check constraint customers length. The conflict occurred in demo table customers table. That means it does not meet the requirement. The data don't meet the requirement that we set up. So that's why you won't be able to insert it. So you can either say click OK, press escape, it will wipe the entire record, or you can add another character which makes it 2, and if you hit enter this time you can see that there is a new customer added in your table. What you can also do is you can check for these constraints, so just to see whether an existing table have a constraint or no. And the way that you can find that is we will go to the plus icon on your table. You've got the folder which is called constraints. Click on that, and there it says you've got a customer, well, you've got a constraint on a customer's table, which is the last length, and that is going to give you the length. Now, if you can remember from our last video on products table, what we have done is we've added some default data. So check constraints for that. What you'll see is you'll see that the default data constraint is also added here. So that means when you put a default data on your column, that's also added as a constraint check. So that also is a validation check, which means do a validation check before an action could happen.